You voted for the Brexit deal.
Yeah.
Is there any aspect of the Brexit deal that if you were Prime Minister, you would reopen, revisit and try to renegotiate? Anything that you would do to change it?
We voted for the deal because the choices before us were to vote for the deal, a thin deal, a deal that isn't a good deal for our manufacturers, for the service sector certainly, but the alternative was no deal. So we voted for that deal.
If it isn't a good deal, which bits would you reopen?
Well, there are bits already that need to be improved on. I mean, if you look at the creative industries and how they are going to operate across borders, there's huge gaps for them. The service sector, of course, has been largely left out. But I don't think that there's scope for major renegotiation. We've just had 4 years of negotiation. We've arrived at a treaty, and now we've got to make that treaty work. It is thin, it isn't what the government promised, but it is better than no deal, and we need to make it work. And you can see one of our criticisms of the government was that they didn't prepare, and you're already seeing the problems at the borders.
So would you reintroduce free movement of people?
Look, I don't think there's an argument for reopening those aspects of the treaty. We have a treaty. Andrew, just hear me out. We have a treaty. It's a thin treaty. It's not what was promised. But I'm very conscious of the fact that everything I'm doing, everything the Labour Party is doing, is geared and focused on winning in a general election in 2024. If we win that election and a Labour government comes in, we will inherit that treaty, and the British people will expect us to make it work, and the EU27 will expect us to make it work. And I enter it in that spirit.
You say you won't look again at the matter of free movement of people. Huge numbers of people in the Labour leadership election and in the country voted for you on the basis that you would do that because you told them you would do that. The Daily Mirror asked you in specific terms, if you become Labour Prime Minister, will you bring back freedom of movement of EU citizens to the UK? And your answer was yes, of course.
Andrew, what I'm saying is this. We've had, 4 years of negotiations with the EU. The last thing anybody wants, including the EU, is to start again from scratch with this treaty. We have got to, for better or for worse, thin treaty though it is, we will inherit that treaty when we come into government in 2024.
So you won't reintroduce free movement. You said that back in January last year, so not that long ago. And also it was the 6th of your 10 pledges that you were going to bring back free movement. And now you're saying, no, I won't.
Well, Andrew, what I'm saying is we've negotiated a treaty, or the Prime Minister's negotiated a treaty. That now is the basis of our relationship with the EU. We didn't know what that was until we saw it just before Christmas. We now know what it is. It's thin. It's not what was promised, but whether we like it or not, that is going to be the treaty that an incoming Labour government inherits and has to make work. And, it is not being straight with the British public to say we can come into office in 2024 and operate some other treaty. We have to make that treaty work.
It's quite a moment to drop a pledge as big as that and say that a future Labour government will not reopen free movement of people. A lot of Labour Party supporters who may have rejoined the European movement and who desperately hope the struggle to rejoin the EU starts here and starts with you. We'll be very, very disappointed to hear
I don't think there's a case for rejoining the EU. I've said that before. I think I've said it on your programme. But I think pretending to the British public that somehow, after 4 years of negotiation, the treaty that's just been secured is going to be up for grabs and that the EU are going to start saying, let's start all over again. That is not realistic. That is not going to happen.
You support the government's points-based immigration system?
Well, look, we didn't support the government on that. We didn't vote for their immigration legislation, not least because of the impact it has on key workers and those that have led us through the pandemic. But the point I'm making, Andrew, is that we were faced in the end with a choice between that deal, bad though it is, and no deal. And I've always said in the public interest, in the national interest, there should be a deal.
You're now hooked on having voted for a bad and thin deal. And in areas where most of your supporters would like you to look again, free movement of people being a very, very obvious example, you are stuck with doing nothing going ahead. Why did you pledge it in the first place?
Well, look, Andrew, we were stuck with a choice between the deal on the table and no deal, and we made the right choice about that. I'm being honest about 2024, which is to say that whether we like that deal or not, and I think it's a thin deal, I don't think it delivers on the Prime Minister's promises, it is the deal that is going to be there in 2024. And the British public are going to look to the Labour Party and to the Prime Minister of a Labour government and say, you need to make that work. There's no good complaining about it. And the EU27 will also say, We have all signed this off, and you need to work with us to make it work. That is the realistic basis upon which we're going into that 2024 election.
So it's a thin deal, but you're going to stick with it. You did pledge free movement of people, but you're not going to do that. And you support the government by and large over the pandemic. Some people say, what does Keir Starmer really stand for? Let me ask you some clear, specific economic questions, which might help us answer that. Do you think everybody should have free broadband?
Well, that was in the Labour Party manifesto, and the case has been made for it. I actually think we should target those that most need it in the immediate weeks, because between now and Easter, many children and young people are not going to be able to learn at home, either because they haven't got devices, laptops or whatever it is, or because the broadband, they don't have broadband, or they have expensive broadband because they're paying for data. That is an immediate problem that needs to be dealt with. So focus on those children or those families that most need it now would be my advice.
And in the long run, does that free broadband thing hold or not?
In the long run, we'll have to see what the situation is in 2024.
Let me ask you something else. Debt at the moment is about 100% of GDP. What would be a dangerous level from your point of view?
Well, we're going to have to reassess debt. We're at huge debt, huge borrowing. I'm not at this stage, Andrew, going to set out what the position is going to be in 2024. I don't know the state of the economy there. I do know that we need to have priorities going forward, secure our economy, protect the NHS and rebuild our country. When it gets to 2024, I will spell out in great detail what an incoming Labour government will do.
Do you still want to scrap universal credit?
Yes, universal credit needs to be scrapped and a new scheme put in place. In the immediate future, what I'm very determined to do is to persuade the government to stop the cut to universal credit that's due to come in April. Sure. That is going to affect millions of families, that cut to universal credit. Sure. It's unfair, and the government shouldn't be doing it.
Let's turn to Scotland. You have said, and I quote, there should be a constitutional commission, quote, to renew the case for devolution. Is that a very urbane way of saying no referendum?
I don't think there should be another referendum. I don't think a further divisive referendum is the right way forward. But I do accept that the status quo isn't working. And I don't accept the argument that if the status quo isn't working, the next thing you do is go to a referendum. I think there are other things that you can do, other arguments that can be made in support of the United Kingdom. And so frankly, Andrew...
You said once the people of Scotland should decide this. If the people of Scotland decide this by voting for an SNP manifesto which says another independence referendum, what more can they do? What else should happen?
Look, Andrew, we're in the middle of a pandemic, probably the darkest moment of the pandemic, in Scotland as much as the rest of the United Kingdom. The idea that the only discussion we're having about Scotland is whether there should be a referendum when the health service is on its knees, the economy is really under strain. Lots of people and families are struggling in Scotland for their jobs and the future.
Boris Johnson told me it should be another 40 years before it's not.
Every time we talk about Scotland, the only question is, should there be another referendum?
Another 40 years before one?
Look, I heard the Prime Minister say that, and I don't agree with him on that. But I do think
sooner than that.
If you ask the people of Scotland what their priorities are, and this has been asked many times in the last few months, most of them understandably say the economy, jobs, health, public service, public services, not and the idea that, you know. In the we're talking about whether the May election should go ahead, and we're talking about a referendum.
Time. A one-word answer, final question. Have you spoken to Joe Biden yet?
No.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Keir Starmer. That's all from me. Thanks to my